Okay, I'll call the meeting of the Oregon School Board of Education together on Monday, August 14th, 2017 at 5 p.m. We're in a joint meeting with the Village of Oregon Village Board. Ms. Wick, will you call the roll? Oh, the school board.
Ms. Feeney? Ms. Odorico?
Here.
Ms. Flanagan?
Present.
Mr. Raymond?
Here.
Mr. Kraus? Mr. LeBrun?
Here.
Mr. Zock?
Present. Mr. Kraus said the board has a quorum. Mr. Kraus had advised me that he's in advance that he's on vacation for the next couple weeks. He's out camping out west, and he's going to follow the eclipse and hopefully be camping under the stars watching the full solar eclipse. And I anticipate that Barb will be here shortly. I have proof that our meeting has been duly noticed under the Wisconsin Open Meetings Law, and that notification will be with Ms. Wick if anyone wants to examine that. Board members, we have an agenda tonight that includes our joint meeting with the village board, and then action items, several items from policy, open enrollment approval, and then some informational items. I'd need a motion to approve tonight's agenda. Mr. LeBrun with the motion. Ms. Flanagan with the second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We have an agenda for tonight's meeting. Village board members, and Mr. Grace, thank you for coming tonight. Something that we've talked about for a while, about getting back together. We did it a number of years ago, and we thought it would be useful to see what we're all doing, because I know we have a lot of stuff going on our end. And so, but I think you probably have to convene your meeting first before we get underway, so go ahead.
Thank you, and thanks for inviting us to this meeting. We're looking forward to it. I would like to call this meeting of the Oregon Village Board to order and request roll call, please.
Bolig.
Here.
Boudreaux.
Here.
Brethauer. Carpenter. Here. Grenier. Here. Jacobson. Here. And Staten.
Here, thank you.
Great. I think with our roll calls, we've sort of identified folks here who haven't been on roll call. If you could, we'll go around. I don't know that all of our board members have met you, Mike. But
Mike Grace, the village administrator.
okay. And this is Janie Wick, who's our administrative assistant, and she keeps us all online and takes our minutes too. And then
My name is Candy Jones, and I'm also work with the village, and I'm the director of administrative services.
great, welcome. And then we have Brian Bussler, our superintendent, and Andy Weiland, our business manager, and Gina Jonan, our legal counsel and HR director at the table. So we've got about an hour and a half on our timetable to talk. We've got a short presentation, about 20 minutes, to tell you what's on our plate and where we're headed. And then I understand, Steve, you've got some information for us as well. And then we'd like to show you our facilities and a short tour, because we're really proud of them, and they're a terrific asset not only to the district but also to the village. So we'll do that. So you and I keep looking at each other, monitoring time. We probably need about a half hour for that, Brian?
Yes.
Okay, so as we approach 6 o'clock, we'll try to wrap things up a little bit. So we have a presentation starting with Brian and a number of board members. So is it okay if we go ahead on our end? So I'm going to turn it over to Brian.
Well, good evening, everyone. First, something that was set at your seats. It says the Oregon School District, The Path Forward. This is a brochure that a number of us worked on over the last couple of years, and it summarizes some of the information you're going to hear tonight, and hopefully when you leave after our presentation, you'll see the connectivity of everything together. But a key takeaway is obviously the puzzle on the front page, which is an apple, and you'll notice the interrelatedness of what we refer to as our 5 values. It's actually something that came out of our visioning conference, and I know a couple of you had the opportunity to participate in Visioning Conference 2.0, which occurred in August of 2015. It was actually the second time we did it. The first time was back in 2007. I've got a couple of slides that I'm going to run through quickly, and we thought it's easier to share this information than to drive you around in the community. So you know it's about school construction, but every time we do a presentation, we always remind ourselves of our mission. And this mission is, I'll say, time-honored in the Oregon School District. It dates back to 1992, so think for a minute what you were doing in 1992. I know I wasn't quite as gray in 1992, but our focus is on helping students acquire the skills, the knowledge, and the attitudes to achieve their individual potential. Little did we know that back in 1992 that would connect so strongly to our personalization, which is providing an individualized education to the extent we can to almost 4,000 students on a daily basis. Here's a picture. If we go to our south, on the left-hand side it says old, and on the new, and on the right side it says new. That's Brooklyn Elementary School. Brooklyn was one of our schools that had a very, it didn't have a safe and secure entrance. And while that sounds crazy for me to say, you might recall during our referendum process we were focused on 3 elements. Element number 1 was safety and security across the schools. Element number 2 is learning environments. A big investment, about 73% of our $55 million was in learning environments. And then our third focus was capital maintenance and energy efficiencies. In essence, ways for us to have a sustainable, a green, and a less cost-effective school facility operation. The next picture is all the students waving to the bus drivers. I didn't realize Wayne was here, but as a bus driver, Wayne always appreciates getting waved at by elementary kids. These are kids standing in front of Brooklyn Elementary School, and one of the elements of Brooklyn is a new transportation and traffic flow, which also increases our safety. When you look to the right of the picture, you'll see that curved area. That's our cafeteria, as well as our large group meeting space, and it has been invaluable and, I don't want to say overused, but appropriately used in Brooklyn, and we've held several district events there as well. This isn't the most fascinating picture until you're at Netherwood and you're in a room where you need heat and it's cold, or you're in a room where you need cold and it's warm. One of the big investments, and Andy worked with Findorf and our contractors, was to replace our heating and ventilation system. And replacing a heating and ventilation system in a building that was built in the 1950s is a big, big project. So not one of those things a lot of people want to invest or spend money on, but obviously a very, very necessary element for the operation of a school. This is a more exciting picture. If you've been between Netherwood and Prairie View, this is the outdoor education space. And we can seat an entire grade level, which is roughly, I'll say 125 kids. Maybe we can't seat 125 adults because we're a little larger, but it's a beautiful setting. Both Prairie View and Netherwood use it a lot. You'll notice the little stage in the Rustish area, and it has become just a premier spot between the two schools. And if you recall, perhaps dropping your children off at Netherwood or Prairie View, it was sort of a mess in this traffic flow. We have cleaned up that mess, and our traffic flow and the safety has been increased geometrically. Another big item at Prairie View, remember one of our first themes was on safety and security. This is the new safe entrance. We're now at a point where all 6 of our schools have a safe and secure entrance for before school, during school, and after school activities. This is a picture looking, we're actually inside the office, looking out to the main entrance. You may not know this, and sometimes I'm always surprised. I guess we didn't market the pool as a big reinvestment. I'm forgetting the exact dollar amount. I know it was less than $1 million, but our community pool was built in 1988, and pools last about 25 years. And we were at that point where we completely reinvested in the heating, ventilation, and of course the air or the water monitoring system. So it looks the same from the outside, but the inside has been totally upgraded, which will save us significantly on the energy maintenance aspect. This is a picture of Oregon Middle School, and on your left is our first ever safe and secure entrance that we have been waiting for a long time. The entrance was actually done just before our winter break, so December of 2016. And if you visited our middle school prior, I know Mr. Staten spent a few days walking up and down that hallway. You'll recall the principal's office was located in the center of the building, which was a common design when the building was built. Obviously, schools have changed, and the need for us to have the office in a more central and secure area. And it's a beautiful space. The brick might be just a little shade different, but if you're not looking real close, you would think that that facility space was always there. Then the picture on the right, that is our STEAM wing. If you go to the back of the picture, or the dark block, there are 3 of the most fantastic music spaces, and you know music is a distinguishing characteristic in our district. They are 3 of the finest music spaces in the state of Wisconsin. I am proud with what our staff requested and how our staff worked with our contractors and architects to design that. When you go to the beige area, that's our STEAM area. We have 2 technology education classes, along with 2 8th grade science classes, along with 2 7th grade science classes, and that really makes our STEAM wing. It is as close to state-of-the-art as it can be. I know another district in the state will build a STEAM wing that will then be state-of-the-art, but we are there right now, and that facility is going to serve us well for years into the future. And just so you know, that little device on the right is not a piece of playground equipment. That's just a lift that the contractors have since moved off of our property before the kids get to school. Next, a feature property, and we hope you have an opportunity to walk through this if you haven't already, and that's our 2-story academic wing located in the north end of the building. We moved into that 2-story academic wing the 2nd semester, so in January of 2017, and by all accounts, every time I walk through and visit with some students, they remind me how great this looks and how dark the rest of the building looks. It's just been a marvelous learning environment for our kids, and we are very proud of the way it turned out and how our kids react in that facility. You'll notice there's a lot of natural light. You'll notice the hallways are wider. It's just a very, very inviting learning experience or learning environment. This is where you entered tonight, our first ever secure entrance for Oregon High School, and this would be referred to as the south entrance. And the design element that the architects and our school staff looked at was to capture people from the curb, and also to funnel people into one main area so that we had a secure area for our students. It serves as sort of our main street and our front door, and you can see this was taken on a beautiful sunny day. It looks even a little better on a sunny day. And then our new gymnasium and our physical education space, we were very undermatched. And if any of you graduated from Oregon High School, you'll recall back when the field house was put on in the 1970s, we were around 500 students. We now have right around 1,200 students, and our physical education space was small. This is a very special day. Some of you may have been here. It's our first ever graduation. The class of 2017 will forever be known as the group that had graduation first in the new gymnasium. The gymnasium was full. It's about 2,000 seating capacity. I'm not sure if we had 2,000 people that day because people tend to spread out, but I would say we had close to 1,800 to 1,900, and it was the feedback that we received from parents and community members was just incredibly favorable about it. And I'm going to kick it over to Steve on our board position papers and bringing you up to speed on some of our history.
Actually, I think we'll talk a little real quick about budget and financing, but a comment before that is the building projects that you just saw were possible because of a $55 million referendum that district taxpayers voted in favor of at about 70%. And largely that was accomplished by, we retired debt that had been on the books for a period of time, and we just dropped this debt, the $55 million, in that hole. And so probably starting this year or next year, we're underneath the long-term debt next year. You know, so it's really the cost of the taxpayers is essentially zero other than the first 2 years because we dropped off old debt and we'd kind of planned that. So I'm just going to give you a real quick update on where we sit from a budgetary standpoint. We'll be approving, our budget year started already. So we're kind of in this weird situation where we're working without an approved budget, and that's the way we do it every year, and we'll probably approve it in October finally once we get final numbers from the state. But Andy?
Yeah, our budget cycle is a little different. And usually, over the last several biennium, we've had the advantage of having a state budget approved. This year, we're at a little bit of a disadvantage. We had to take some estimates. We did budget conservatively. Their numbers that we've been told are anywhere between $150 or $200 per student would be additional funds that we would get. That equates to somewhere between like a 1.5% increase in allowable spending for us. So the budget, for the most part, I don't want to bore you with a lot of details. We are obviously living within that amount of money. We're implementing our compensation system. Probably the most important thing that you would be interested in is what impact is that's going to have on the tax levy. We have had some growth, and because of that growth, when we have additional students, we are allowed to levy more. In addition, we did lose a little bit of state aid from the prior year. That happens just basically based on assessed values of properties throughout the state, and based on those property values and how they are, it's kind of built a little bit on the Robin Hood principle. The districts that have more property value get a little bit less state aid, and the districts that have less state aid get a little bit more less property value, had a little bit more state aid. So because our property values went up more than everybody else in the state last year on average, we reduced a little bit of our state aid. So we're looking at an impact, a tax levy impact of around 3.5%. That's a guess right now because I don't have a state budget. I still don't have my assessed values or even my student counts. But if I were to throw a dart at something, that's kind of probably where we're at right now. But otherwise, our finances are looking good. School district finances, growth is good. Declining enrollment is extremely bad. And there are many, many districts in the state of Wisconsin that are in a position where they are declining, and that's just difficult. So, but things are going in a good direction here in Oregon.
Great. Thanks, Andy. We're going to share with you in our remaining time projects that we're working on. The first one, and I'll talk about, is our board position papers. And for coming up on 25 years, the board has over time at intervals drafted various position papers as strategic plans. And you can see we started in 1994 and have walked through 2017. Earlier this year, we adopted the Path Forward, which you have a copy. I made copies for the village board members. Which the first part of the Path Forward is a survey, a kind of a recounting of where we've been since 1994 and what our journey has been, and then where we're going to go in terms of the path forward. Most significant out of that effort from the board was the identification of 5 values that drive successful school districts and student learning. And those are caring and professional educators, relevant and empowering learning experiences, an emphasis on the whole child, educational equity, and strong family and community partnerships. And at the back of the document in front of you, there's a document called Growth and Achievement for All Learners, and that takes those 5 values that drive our mission and breaks them down into value statements and potential value practices. That is, those practices that we can implement that would enhance those values and thus move us on our mission. And so we're working on that. And what you're going to hear is how we're moving forward to implement the long-term strategy that we have outlined in this paper. So I think, Jeff, you're next. This is what you value. We've got the apple, then kind of takes along on our 4 C's logo and converts that into a values document. But Jeff's going to talk. Before you get to that, Jeff, every year in May after elections, the board has an in-service where we identify priorities for the coming year. We had one again, and the board, by consensus, adopted these 5 priorities for us to work on. The first is to oversee and integrate the implementation of our strategic plan. The second thing was to continue on with the implementation of our teacher compensation plan. And as you heard from Andy, we're doing that in the context of our budget. And we're in year 2 work of our equity initiative. And then we've got a number of task forces that you're going to hear about today. And then closing out our construction projects. So we've got a busy year. Those are some pretty hefty initiatives and priorities that we've got. And the first one is Jeff, who is the chair of our visioning committee, and that committee is charged with implementing our strategic plan that's identified in the path forward. Jeff, the floor is yours.
Hi, folks. I'm going to fill you in on priority number 1, if we could go back to the previous slide. Thanks. Which is implementation of the path forward paper. And we're working with Dr. Jim Rickabaugh, whom some of you may have heard of. He's been working with the district for years on our personalized learning initiative. Before I get into the details, I need to define a couple terms for you. And I'm going to use an analogy which was provided to the board by Dr. Bustler and Dr. Rickabaugh a couple months ago. So I want you to think about the intersection south of town between here and Brooklyn, where Highway A crosses Highway 14. And from my understanding, it's a pretty dangerous intersection, and there have been some bad accidents there. And right now, it's a 2-way stop. Folks on County A stop, but folks on 14 don't. So, you might ask yourself, what would be a good way to make this intersection safer? And you could do things like make it a 4-way stop, but then that might cause congestion. You could put in stoplights, which might make it even safer. But these changes don't solve the core problem, which is traffic is moving perpendicular to each other there. So when there are accidents, you're going to get like a T-bone, which is the most dangerous kind of accident. So things like adding stop signs and stoplights, these are transactional changes. These are incremental changes to an existing design, and while they might improve the situation, they don't radically improve the situation. So there's a reason that there's been a proliferation of roundabouts, and that's because they are fundamentally safer than a traditional intersection for a couple reasons. First of all, you don't get perpendicular traffic. If there's going to be a collision, it's going to be a glancing blow. It has other advantages. You may not even need to stop if there isn't traffic there. This type of design change is called a transformational change. So those are the 2 terms I want you to keep in your mind. Transactional is incremental changes to an existing design, and transformational is a rethinking and you take a step back and try to design something that's better from scratch. So what does this have to do with the most recent board paper? The paper describes a learning environment that we would like to see in the Oregon School District 5 or 10 years down the road. And the kind of changes it's going to take to make that a reality are transformational in nature, not transactional. These kind of changes are usually more difficult and disruptive than incremental changes. So, but it's also, that kind of change is also ultimately more rewarding. So those of you that haven't read the position paper, one aspect that's important to realize is that the paper describes the what and the why of what we would like to see taking place in the district, but it doesn't describe the how. So what I'm saying is that it doesn't dictate the implementation of the vision. We want that to take place in the individual buildings, and we're leaving that up to the principals and school leadership teams. So these folks are being tasked with making transformational changes, and that can be a daunting task because it's fundamentally different from what you've done for years and years. And that's where Dr. Rickabaugh and Dr. Bustler come in. He's going to help guide us through work with the school leadership teams and administration to see that those transformational changes take place over the next few years. And now we're on the next slide. If we can go to the next slide. So, can you go to the next one, Brian or Andy, who's ever running things? Sure. This project has 3 main phases. The first is listening to educators and administrators about the current situation and asking questions to get people's minds thinking about how these transformational changes can take place. That has already taken place earlier this summer. The next phase is preparing and taking that data that was obtained through the focus groups and collating it and understanding the current situation. And finally, phase 3 is going to be actual implementation, which again, individual buildings are going to be writing their own implementation plans for how we're going to achieve this vision. This project, initiative, whatever you'd like to call it, began in April of this year, and we're thinking it's going to come to completion in April of next year. So that's where we're at with that. If Dr. Bustler has anything to add, he's the expert on the subject.
One of the other elements that our Oregon School Board has been terrific with is the willingness to read books. There's a book study that's part of this, and it's called The 5 Levers to Improve Instruction. And I've always felt very fortunate to work with a school board that's willing to take the time to read about educational policy and how it's going to impact schools. So we are really excited about phase 2. We're going to have maybe the biggest book study in the Oregon community of about 75 to 100 people reading this book.
Courtney is one of the co-chairs of our Student Population and Growth Task Force, because there's some very significant developments on that line, and we're trying to get ourselves out 10 to 15 years on the horizon for planning purposes. So Courtney, if you could report on what you guys are doing.
So my understanding is back in December, January, the school board created a task force called the Student Growth and Population Task Force, which began meeting in February of this year. And the task force is made up of several members. Dr. Bergstrom and myself are the co-chairs. There are district administrators, the president of the teachers union, and several community members are all part of this task force. And the task force was charged with 3 things, which I think are up there. Yes, to study both the long-term population and student census in the Oregon School District, which I will remind you is a very large geographic area that includes not just the Village of Oregon, but the city of Fitchburg, all the way down to Brooklyn and beyond to the east and west. So the task force will be charged with studying the population growth, the long-term capacity of existing district facilities, and how those facilities will support the census growth, and then whether additional facilities are needed, and if so, the location of those facilities, the grade levels, and their impact on existing facilities in the district. So this task force is advisory in nature, and at the conclusion of the studies, the task force will be making a written recommendation to the Vision Steering Committee, not to the full board, but to the Vision Steering Committee, with just what actions we think that the district ought to take in reaction to that growth. So we have been doing a few things. We've been working with MD Roffers Consulting, who is a consultant who has great experience with this type of project, studying the impact of growth in school districts around the Dane County area. Actually, I think all over Wisconsin. And he is working on a report, which we have seen preliminary reports, but he's working on the final report, which should come out sometime in September. And he has some very proven methodologies, which include meeting with developers who have projects on the books in areas around the school district. He's met, I think, Mike, he met with you. He's met with city administrators, again, all throughout the district. He's looked at home sales, existing home sales, all kinds of past census reports, and is looking into the future. And his report has looked at growth that is anticipated in a few segments, one in 2020, one in 2025, and then the far growth potential for 2030, which sounds like it's a long way away, but really is only 13 years in the future, so not very far in the future. What the preliminary numbers are telling us is that there is great student growth coming to the Oregon School District. I'm sure if some of you have driven both west of the village and north up through Fitchburg, you have seen a lot of construction happening, a lot of groundwork preparation for building that's coming. And according to Mark's preliminary study, it looks like the Oregon School District, which currently has almost 4,000 students, may be gaining as many as 2,000 students by the year 2030. So that, again, that's only 13 years away, and that's half again what we currently have. So that's preliminary. That's based on Mark's study, and we are, as a task force, looking at several options as to how we might anticipate and handle that growth over those same sort of interims, whether we're building now, whether we're building 13 years from now. That's what we're looking at. We're also working very closely with Bray Architects on detailed capacity studies of our existing facilities. So we met with them last week, wasn't it, Leslie? And learned sort of down to the last student how many students our buildings can hold, how many more they can absorb, and where kind of the break happens between capacity and learning environments being compromised, I guess I would say. So that's a very important piece of what we're looking at as we study this. I guess our next steps are to engage the community. We are going to be talking with folks in September as school starts back up, and the task force will continue to study the numbers and start to talk about options about how we meet that growth, that anticipated growth. And currently our timeline includes us making a recommendation to the Vision Committee in February of next year. So we're working hard because this growth is coming, and it's coming fast, and we want to be ready for it so that we don't compromise learning environments, and that the education our kids get in the Oregon School District remains top-notch. So,
thank you, Courtney. The next top task force that we have is a youth sports and athletics task force, and Krista, you're on that committee and one of the chairs, so go ahead.
Okay, thank you. The Youth Sports Task Force is not a new idea. There was a Youth Sports Task Force back in 2005. We felt in 2017 it was time to revisit that topic, and you may be asking why a task force. In our high school, half of our students participate in a co-curricular sport. There are dozens and dozens of youth sports organizations in this community that operate separately from the school district. What we define as athletics is grades 7 through 12. We also know research tells us that if kids make a connection, that they're going to be more successful in school. So sometimes that happens with friends, sometimes that happens with a teacher, a lot of times that happens with a coach. And so we think that youth sports and athletics is a real key to learning. not only through connection, but we know that when kids participate in sports, they make healthier choices. Obesity is a reality for youth in our country, so that's another reason why youth sports and athletics are really important, in a multitude of reasons, which I'm sure you're very aware of. So we felt it was time to reconvene a group that is made up of community members, medical professionals, teachers, coaches, parents that represent all sorts of sports, and coming together. And what we're really looking at is, should we make some recommendations about what youth sports and athletics should represent? Are there shared values, like you see these 5 values here? Should there be shared values for youth sports organizations from K4 all the way up through seniors in high school? So we'll be looking at, are there shared values? Are there expectations that we all can hold? And then what are the future outcomes and best practices that maybe these organizations should have based on the lens of education and learning for our kids? So we just started meeting, and we took the summer off, but we'll be picking up again in September, and hopefully we'll have a report back to the board with those recommendations in early spring.
Our next task force is an environmental task force, and Dan Kraus and Barb Feeney have been active in that as the board representative. So Barb, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Steve. So Dan isn't here tonight, so I'm going to fill in for him. Last year, we had a task force going to meet on issues about sustainability in the school district. We had some teachers on the task force and some members of the community. And we ended up going in kind of a twofold direction. One of the emphases of the paper was looking at sustainability issues from the standpoint of operations. And we are fortunate to have a business manager who's really interested in those issues, and we've done some great things already in the school district on the issue of sustainability, and some of those things happened during the construction that's been going on in the last 2 years. But we wanted to take a look at how we can take it to the next level in the school district and really become a leader in that area. And then the other prong of our two-pronged approach was to look at curriculum. We know that then this next generation we're educating is going to face a major issue with climate change, which can potentially affect every aspect of their lives. And we wanted to talk about how we can go about educating them to, first of all, be well aware of the issues and what it's going to mean for them, and so that they can be leaders in that area of problem solving as adults in the working world. So we ended up with some short-term recommendations on both of those, on both prongs, and also some longer-term recommendations. I think I'd say the paper it's been reviewed by the Vision Steering Committee and will be going to the full board sometime in the near future. And then we hope to keep on the path that we've already been on. I do want to say we have some teachers in this school district who are passionate on this topic of environmental education and doing some very innovative and exciting things. And we had some of those working with us on the task force. So we are definitely not starting from a 0 point on this. We're well along the path, and we just want to keep going.
Thanks, Barb. The last initiative that we have this year is equity. And we recognize our district is becoming more diverse, both socioeconomically and racially. And we see our neighboring districts working with their increasing diversity as well. And so the districts involved, and Dr. Bergstrom's been spearheading that with the National Equity Project and working with equity issues and looking out into the future as we become more diverse to make sure we're ahead of the curve there. So I hope if you get a theme from our board is that we stay pretty high up in policy matters and try to look out 10 to 15 years and get ahead of curves that we developments that we see coming. And so that's why we have the task force that are ongoing right now and the work that we're doing in the building. So We ran a little long, but we're kind of passionate about where we're at. We work pretty hard and pretty proud of where we're going. But Steve, the floor is now for the village board, and take what time you need. We can adjust the back end of our meeting for a business meeting if we need to.
So I have a few comments I'll make as kind of things we kind of have in the works the next year and a half. And I'll make some comments about big picture. I would invite comments from any trustees anytime you'd like to. If you pick the mic up, there's a little switch to turn it on. And I was advised to be sure and turn that off before you lay it down. There's a loud bang when it hits the table. So, but feel free to add anything you'd like to on these items. First is the status of the Civic Campus Plan, which is what we're looking at downtown. That's been in the news for at least a couple of years, if not longer. That's coming to fruition. We'll be deciding next Monday the location for the new library, and I think that's pretty much a done deal in our minds. But looking at the former site of the Methodist Church, I think that's where that will probably end up. And then we'll, at some point in time after that, have to start talking about the senior center. And one conceptual idea, and that's all it is right now, is that we would sell the property where the current senior center and library are to a private developer. They would develop that into a senior center with senior housing above that. We would then rent space back from them. So that's kind of out there that we'll be looking at. It's only very initial discussion, but that's a way to provide some needed housing for seniors in a good location, and also to recover some of the tax money that we lost when we took over the property that was the Methodist Church, because for about 10 years there were taxes paid on that. So one that's important to the school district is getting Jefferson Street done before school starts. You hear that, Wayne? That'll make the bus drivers and others real happy, and that's on target. North Burr Oak will be by late fall. We're putting some new culverts there, raising the road bed because of the potential for flooding in that area. The next item I call the Andy Weiland project. That's extension of North Prairie Parkway in 2018, so that people can go through there. We'll move the composting site, of course, and get that done. And if you're ever on Oak Street in the morning, schools are starting, there's a lot of cars there, and it'll make the neighbors, I think, real happy getting that taken care of and get that fixed. And Andy can then cross that off his list, so that'll make us both happy. Also, as far as streets, that's always something we have to work on. We'll be doing a large bidding in the spring of 2018, which will combine some dollars from other years for chip and seal for streets to do more there. We've done a lot on $2 million or so in the last couple of years. We also got the area out by the roundabouts on the north side of town. That was not our project, that was a county, but we can thank Jerry Bollick for that as a county supervisor for finally getting Fitchburg and the county together to get that done, and that was a boost for the area also. With regard to biking, I know that's something that's important to people here in the Rotary and people that bike that are present. We are working on getting the Rotary Trail extended to the Badger State Trail. There's several options for that. They're all out of our district, would involve Fitchburg and the county in doing that. We have had a meeting with Joe Parisi and others at the county level. They're quite supportive of getting it done. They hope to have some grant money in their next budget for biking facilities again. So Fitchburg will get on that. We've met with Fitchburg, Patrick Marsh, their administrator, and he's very excited about getting the trail connected also. And it's never easy because it involves a lot of private property and roads and stuff like that. So, but we'd like to get that connected as primarily an off-road trail if we can. Probably involving Adams Road in some way, shape, or form, a short part that would be on-road, but heading in that direction with 2 or 3 different options. So we're hoping that would happen also. There's also a bike trail that would go through Anderson Park out into the town of Oregon and connect the village, and Wayne and his board have been working on that, and there have been letters of support, and that would be a very nice connection to one of their parks also, and connect folks on the west side to the village and an off-road trail. So a hotel is always on the horizon, it seems like that. It just kind of keeps slipping over the horizon. In large part, I would say it seems like past developers have wanted the village to be the largest investor, and we have not been willing to do that. Jeannie Carpenter is on the Planning Commission. There's been some conceptual discussion. I'll let her explain that.
Sure. So and on the Planning Commission, we're very excited that yet another developer has come forward, but this is a little bit more promising because this is a local person. This is the Coyle family. They've owned the property where The sporting goods store is right across from the old Waterfall restaurant. It's an area that's desperately in need of redevelopment, and so we're very excited that a local family has come forward. They know they don't have the expertise to do all the work. They're hiring some really good people, and they're actually to the point where they brought forward a conceptual plan to the Planning Commission the first part of this month, and the Planning Commission was very supportive of how the building looked, the landscaping, and so forth. So we are hoping we have a winner this time.
Thank you. I would mention that there are a number of developers looking at adding lots in the village. Looks like around 175 single-family lots and 50 two-family units approximately. So obviously that affects the school district, and they're working with staff on moving those forward. Also, the property, it's now called the Hofer property. It was the Viridian property just over the hill from the middle school. That's back on the radar screen again, and they're looking at developing that. That would involve some changes to Highway MM and dropping that hill down somewhat to make that a better area for kids getting to and from school and so on. So that's something that's out there. It's still just getting started, but it's in process right now to take a look at that. We did approve the creation of TID 5, created a bit of a dust up with some of the residents in their homes, and we appreciate the input that we got from them. The Planning Commission board felt what they had to say was reasonable, and those boundaries have been changed. Mike has a map that he'll pass around for you to take a look at if you're interested. That will play a continued part in the downtown redevelopment and also along Market Street. Our planner has said that with the potential for the library on the Methodist Church property, that that's going to quite likely have an impact on more North Main Street, but even more so on Market Street, and some redevelopment that might happen there that would have a favorable impact on the village. With the Dorn redevelopment, we got quite excited about that at Dorn Hardware, but there's been some health issues in the family that has been kind of put on the back burner for now, and we're not sure when that's going back to us. This one's kind of funny. Burger King is going to completely renovate their building. They're doing this across the state, and they're putting, what, $500,000 in it? Huge amount of money that they're putting into that building to bring it up to date both inside and outside. So that will be a boost for the north end of town. And then JC Park West, I know people here have been interested in that. You've done a lot of work out there and it looks great with what's been happening. We're waiting for cost estimates to come back from Rattler, our village consultant. We'll then work on an arrangement with local sports organizations for the joint development of that park. So those are kind of some specific things we have going on. Any other comments from trustees on those? Okay, just kind of big picture. We've had a lot of growth in the village, again, in the last 20 years, and a lot of our staffing has stayed pretty flat, so we'll be looking at increasing staffing. We've done that in the police department, and I know Chief Ewell is interested in more staffing, and the board is interested in working with him on that. Like all of our department heads, he's done an excellent job. We're very fortunate in the village to have the leadership that we have with the people in our offices and leadership. We're also very interested in working on employee compensation. We look at comparables with 4 or 5 other municipalities, and when the recession hit, we fell behind in some places. We want to catch that back up. Our employees across the board, we feel, do a really nice job. We want to keep them here and keep them happy. And then also in a general way, we've had, I think this board has focused on this a lot, as has the Chamber of Commerce through the leadership of Judy Knudsen, and that's kind of maintaining our small town atmosphere and a family-friendly community, the key word being community. And it's not just the village of Oregon, it's the town, it's Rutland, Dunn, Brooklyn, and so on, all of which are very important to moving ahead. I know at one of our meetings we had many years ago, a person made the comment that we were 4 municipalities that were present on the topic, but we're all one community. I think that's the way the board looks at things, is what's going to be best for the community and connecting people and moving us forward and feeling that we're a community where people do connect and enjoy being here and doing things with people that are here. So that's kind of what we have right now, much shorter than what you had. I don't know, trustees have any comments? There's a mic down there. Anything you'd like to say? So, and I would say that just in informal conversations, the board certainly appreciates what the school board is doing. what you did with that referendum was pretty amazing and has had a huge impact on the municipality here. And I think in working together as we do with kind of common missions and that sense of community, it's a plus for both organizations.
One of the first things that we did a long time ago was 2008. We were looking at J.C. Park, and we met with the village board about deeding over that half of J.C. Park to the district for purposes of upgrading that for athletic facilities. And then the recession hit, and we always had that dream. And we as you can see, if you go down today, the light poles are up on the softball field and the baseball field. So that's nearing completion. We've been going incrementally as we found funding, and one of the goals was not to raise taxes by building that out. And through Andy's help and leadership in terms of the construction project, that will be built out without increasing taxes. You know, we're using funds that we've already got, you know, and we're able to reallocate. And then using part of the referendum dollars that we had here, because we got good bids, we were able to allocate some money out of those funds to get that completed. So probably in the next month or so, we're going to have a finished off project or near finished off project that's just going to be a gem. As you come in, when you finish up the extension of Perry Parkway and people will come down that street, that'll be a pretty amazing sight, driving by that and then coming into our entrance here. So good. Anybody have any questions for anybody going both ways with that? Good. I think it's tour time then. Brian, are you going to be tour leader or how?
I'm going to ask our local expert, Mr. Weiland.
Okay, so we're going to follow Andy to where we're going to go. So,
and he is a path.
So at this time, the Oregon School Board is going to recess for purposes of taking our tour, and we'll be back sometime near 6:30 to resume our business meeting.